to another episode of Three True Values. We're back with you this week. March has begun. We are just days away from Selection Sunday. The bracket is really starting to take shape. We've got conference tournament action going on every night. We're going to crown five more conference champions tonight. That will lead into, of course, the start of all of our high major conference tournaments. We'll see them play into the weekend, some of them into Sunday as we get this bracket all set up. We get it ready to go before the committee makes their final decision. Of course, Sunday night, we're going to have to break it all down. We're going to have to look at our bracket, make our picks, be in your pool with your coworkers, your friends, your family, whoever it is that you make your March Madness selections with. You're going to be doing that here in just a few days. So we want you to be fully prepared. So that's what this episode is all about. We're going to talk about the bracketology side of it. We're going to talk about the bubble watch part of all of this. And then we're going to give you the teams that you need to be picking in your bracket. We're going to split that into three different segments as we do every week. We might throw in like a little bit of a games of the week thing at the end, but it's really hard, especially when we don't know any of the matchups that will be happening from, I think, Thursday on. We don't really know who anyone will be playing, so it's hard to kind of decide which one's the most important. However, as we get right into it, it's time to talk about the bracketology side of everything. That's what I've been doing over these past few months, breaking it all down, trying to figure out which team is going to land where within this NCAA tournament. As we know, we've got some automatic bids already clinched. Stetson out of the A-Sun. They project to be a 16 seed, so you might see them in that first four in Dayton. That's where they are right now. Unless there are more upsets in conference tournaments that lead to lower ranked teams making the field, they will be in that first four, and we will see them play in Dayton for the right to play against a 1 seed in that next round. We've got out of the Big South, we've got Longwood. Longwood also projects as a 16 seed. They are closer to that edge of a 15 seed, so potentially I'm not sure how many upsets we would need to get them up into that conversation. Probably a 16 seed, though, at this point. Then out of the Missouri Valley, Drake has clinched their spot. We'll talk about what that does for Indiana State in the next segment, but we know Drake is in the field somewhere between the 11 and 12 seed lines. That's going to have to do with how many bid stealers we get, how many conference tournaments go to teams that are already in the field. Where does that bubble land? Is it on the 11 seed, the 12 seed? Is it kind of that split situation where we get one of those games as an 11, one of those games as a 12? That's all going to go into this as well. We keep going. The Ohio Valley Conference, Morehead State comes out of there. They were the first team to clinch their spot in the NCAA tournament. They look right now like a 14 seed to me. That's where I'm going to keep them on my bracket. Then as we keep moving forward, the SoCon champions, Samford. I've had a lot of questions about Samford. They're a team that people are really interested in. Buckyball, the way Bucky McMillan, a young coach, a guy who came from the high school ranks, the way he runs his team, it's piqued people's interest. They are going to be a team to watch out for when we get to that last segment. We start talking about who should I pick as the upset? That legendary, the 5-12 game, the 4-13 game, we're going to see some of those upsets go down here. Samford is one that you're going to want to watch who they are playing and whether that team has what it takes to beat them, because they play a good brand of basketball. They are currently a 13 seed. Like I said, they're in that 12-13 conversation. They'll be somewhere between there. Then the final team that has already clinched their spot, that is locked into the tournament, nothing can happen to them, James Madison. James Madison, let me tell you, not in bracketology for much of the past few weeks. You say, well, were they not supposed to win their tournament? Well, they weren't the number 1 seed, but they only have 3 losses all season. Okay, it just so happened that some of those losses came in conference play and ended up knocking them below Appalachian State in the conference standings. So this James Madison team, one of the best mid-majors in the country, right there close to the top 50 in the net, a real threat when we get into the NCAA tournament. They beat Michigan State, if you will remember, very early in the season, had people panicked about Michigan State. Michigan State still in the field for now, but James Madison still looks to be that team that can knock off any given high major program that they have to face. So right now they are an 11 seed. That looks to be likely where they are going to land. And those are the teams that are locked in. Now tonight we're going to get more locks into the NCAA tournament. We'll get 5 more. We've got the Coastal. Charleston is currently the favorite there. Out of the Horizon, Oakland is still the favorite as of now. The Northeastern Conference, it'll be Merrimack versus Wagner. One of those is going to be a 16 seed. We will see which one it is, likely going through Dayton in that first 4. The Summit League, South Dakota State currently is your favorite to win that one tonight. And then the West Coast Conference, where it will not matter who wins. Both of those teams, St. Mary's and Gonzaga, they have both clinched up their spot. Gonzaga has a real chance. I know a lot of people wanted to talk about them as a bubble team. I fought back against it. I have said for quite a while now, their resume, not only does it line up with all the other teams around them, were they going to make it in? But they had so much more room to keep moving up the bracket. And right now, they are listed as a 7 seed in my bracketology. They have a potential to pick up another quad 1 win over St. Mary's tonight, and they will move, depending on how everything else shapes out in these conference tournaments, they will move to the top of that 7 line. Potentially, if other teams slip up, they could go into the conversation for a 6 seed by the time this is all said and done. So Gonzaga, they answered all your questions. They have not lost in quite a long time. You go back and you look at it and you say, okay, maybe we overreacted, because this team looks like they can make some real damage in March. Maybe we can just pump the brakes a little bit. You know who I think is going to do really well in these bracket challenges, who I think that is going to have a lot of success? And this kind of goes to a couple of teams in the field. We'll get more into it in the second segment, but people who maybe aren't aware of what the perception was in the middle of the year of some of these teams. Because some of these teams, we had something that we thought about them, then we panicked in the middle of the year. We said, oh no, they're not that. Well, now they look like that again, but we're still treating them with hesitance because of what we saw in the middle of the year. Gonzaga fits right into that mold. There's some people who are going to pump the brakes. They're going to say, no, Gonzaga, remember, they're not what they were. Well, they are right now. They continue to be what they were right now. They weren't for a certain chunk of the schedule, but now they look like that again. They've got Nimbar. They've got Ike. I mean, those dudes that were shooting threes last night, I think they all hit just about everything they took. So I'm not very concerned about Gonzaga. I think that they will be very good in the NCAA tournament. As we talk about bracketology, though, I think since we're going to do bubble watch in the second segment, where we need to head next is the top of the bracket, where currently we know, I've said it for I think 2 months now, Purdue, UConn, Houston. That's your top 3. That is how things are set. It's not changing. Okay, you can make your case for whatever team you want. They are not passing those 3. There's nothing that can happen now. All 3 of them can lose in the first game of their conference tournament, and still they will be the top 3 overall seeds. Likely in that order, UConn, I think potentially could get that number 1 overall seed. But then again, those 3 not overly worried about who is the number 1 overall seed, since Purdue clearly wants to play in the Midwest, where they would go to Detroit. UConn clearly wants to play in the East, where they would go to Boston, and Houston clearly wants to play in the South, where they would go through Dallas. So that leaves the West. Los Angeles is the site there, and we've got Tennessee, North Carolina, and Arizona. Arizona had a chance over the weekend to climb back onto that 1 seed slot, but they were not able to capitalize on a loss by Tennessee. Tennessee dropped a game against Kentucky. Kentucky, who's surging, they're moving up the board. We'll talk about them here in just a second. But they still lost a game, and that opened the door for Arizona to then have a better overall resume. What do? They drop a game against a struggling USC team, a team that had no business hanging around and beating Arizona. So that knocks them down. It doesn't just knock them back off the 1 seed line, though. What it did was it gave North Carolina an opportunity, who has a better overall record as well, to surpass them. Now, there has been a case made that North Carolina, with a better overall record by 1 game and a head-to-head meeting with Tennessee, should be the last number 1 seed. And I hear that argument. I'm okay with that argument. I think that you could put North Carolina as that last 1 seed. I don't think that's unreasonable at all. Why I have Tennessee there right now is because the resumes are quite close. It is right there. And I think that Tennessee's edges out North Carolina's just by a little bit. But if you want to say that head-to-head should close that gap and put them ahead, I will listen to that. However, when I look at it, I understand that if Tennessee wins out through the SEC tournament, if they lock up the SEC title, regular season and postseason, the teams that they will do that through, the wins that they will pick up, will be better than the wins that North Carolina can pick up on their way to an ACC title, which means that Tennessee's resume would then separate further from North Carolina's. So it is purely going to be based on the way that I have these 2 teams positioned. It is based on what is going to happen as well as what happened. Like I said, it's not like I'm just putting Tennessee there because of something that's going to happen. No, if you want to call it a tie, you can call it a tie. Well, I'm going to give the tie to the team that has the clear ability to jump in front. So if Tennessee and North Carolina go the same distance in their 2 conference tournaments, I think Tennessee has the edge. If North Carolina makes it further than Tennessee, say Tennessee drops out in the semifinals, North Carolina goes to the final. Well, then it comes down to how North Carolina performs in that last game, and North Carolina could very well jump Tennessee. And we're going to be watching this all in real time as these tournaments go on day by day. So we're going to get a little bit of a back and forth on these resumes and figure it out. I think Arizona, unfortunately, almost played themselves out of this situation. They would need Tennessee and North Carolina to lose, I think, before the final of their conference tournament. So if you're an Arizona fan, you need to bet on early exits from Tennessee and North Carolina and hope that Arizona can get it back together, regroup, and go on to win the Pac-12 tournament and do it convincingly, hopefully, in order to help their resume and those computer numbers get you back into that 1 seed conversation. When you look down the board, though, there's a little bit more conversation that's going on between those 2 seeds, the 3 seeds, and the 4 seeds. The 2 seeds right now, North Carolina, Arizona, but the bottom half of that is Iowa State and Marquette. Now, neither of them are locked in as 2 seeds. Right now, they are the 2 seeds, but on that 3 line, you've got Creighton, who is surging. They've picked up some big wins recently. You look at their resume, you look at the way that they're playing. I mean, just the eye test for Creighton looks incredible right now. They're a team that you might want to pick when you get into your bracket. Baylor. I mean, Baylor is going to be in that same conference tournament as Iowa State. Same thing with Creighton and Marquette. Whichever of those goes deeper in the Big East tournament, whichever of these 2 from the Big 12 goes deeper, probably has the upper hand in getting a 2 seed. You look at Duke on that 3 line. They just lost to North Carolina. Say they avenge that. Say they're able to run the table. If they win the ACC, they're going to have a really good case to be a 2 seed as well. And then Kentucky, who, as I said, moving up the board. They keep climbing, keep moving up. If they're able to get a win streak going, they knock off an Auburn, an Alabama, a Tennessee, these big SEC teams that are up at the top with them. They've still got some upward movement that they can make happen over these next few days. Then the 4 seeds, Auburn, Alabama, Kansas, and Illinois. Kansas sliding back. They're going to have to kind of regrip. I don't think they have to do anything spectacular to keep the honor of hosting a region, but I think that they do have to beat teams that they're supposed to beat on the way there. I don't think they'll have much of a problem with that, but it is the Big 12. I mean, it's not easy. Not easy at all. You look at the schedule, just the way it's going to be shaped out. There are no easy games ever in that conference, especially in the conference tournament when you're playing day after day after day. So Kansas will need to show just a little bit of something. And then Illinois, of course, they're in that last spot. Right behind them, BYU, San Diego State, Dayton, and South Carolina. Any of those 5 seeds, really, I think, have the ammunition left to go through their conference tournament, make some noise. Say one of them makes the final of their conference tournament. I think they for sure get into that 4 seed conversation right there with Illinois. So that's the top of your bracket. That's all the shifting pieces. You're going to see which region goes to where. If you live close to one of the regions and you want to go watch these games, you root for whichever results get you the teams you want to see, right? So if you want to see, if you're close to Charlotte, well, Tennessee and North Carolina, probably the 2 teams that you're going to get access to. And then from there, it'll be whichever 8, 9, 7, 10 matchups come your way. So that is what is all at play here at the top of the bracket as we go into this final week, as we talk about conference championships, who can win each one, which teams are making little mini runs, because that's what's going to be important in determining the seed line. These high major tournaments, whoever wins is probably already locked in the field. We probably already know that they are dancing in March, but look for teams that are making runs. A team that starts on Wednesday, now they're playing on Saturday. That's the team that is improving their stock and getting themselves up 1, maybe even 2 seed lines by the time it's all said and done. When we come back on the other side, we will talk about the other side of the bracket. We're going to do some bubble watching and talk about which teams have to prove something, which team needs to make that Wednesday to Saturday run if they want to be in the field on Sunday. We'll be right back on 3 True Values. Welcome back into 3 True Values. We keep things rolling, talking about the end of the season here. End of the regular season, start of conference tournaments, end of some conference tournaments. We've got Selection Sunday right around the corner. It is just a loaded slate. We have so much to talk about, and we are rolling through it all now. We are looking at the bubble. Which teams need to solidify themselves in the NCAA tournament field? We'll start with the last 4 byes, because yes, that last 4 in, they're the ones who are going to have to go to Dayton. They're the ones that are going to have to play their way into the bracket. But if this last 4 bye group does not have a good conference tournament run, they could be either in that last 4 in or potentially even drop all the way out of the bracket. So we're looking at Oklahoma, Colorado State, Mississippi State, and Colorado there. Colorado out of the Pac-12. So there's not a lot of strength in that conference right now. You look at Washington State and Arizona, who we talked about before. They're the only 2 who are solidified in the field from the Pac-12. Then on the outside looking in, Utah, I mean, they're very bottom of this bubble conversation that we're going to talk about. So if you're Colorado, there's not a whole lot of teams in this conference tournament that you can afford to lose to without it hurting your resume, dropping you right onto the bubble, like really close to dangerous territory if you're the Buffaloes. So they need to be careful. Oklahoma, I mean, they've just kind of gotten tripped up and tripped up and tripped up over and over and over again. by that Big 12 schedule. So they need to kind of get their footing, make sure, get at least one win in that conference tournament. And I think you can kind of breathe a sigh of relief and think, okay, did enough. Body of work, the amount of wins that we've got in this conference, the amount of quad one opportunities, quad two opportunities that we faced over and over again. All right, we can settle down. But they've got to get that win. Can't be one and done. Same with Mississippi State in the SEC. Cannot be one and done. Got to get that first game at least, and then you want to make a run so that you're not sweating it out on Sunday. Then Colorado State. Colorado State has become kind of the team that we're talking about when we discuss the bubble and the Mountain West Conference. Them and New Mexico, who is in that last four in category. We've talked about, can the Mountain West get 6 bids into the NCAA tournament? 4 of them appear to be locks right now. You've got San Diego State, Utah State, Nevada, and Boise State. All have really cemented their resumes, especially in the last few weeks. They've taken care of business. Colorado State and New Mexico, they have the most to prove in this conference tournament in order to ensure that they get all 6 teams into the field. So those two, look for them to come out and look at that bracket. Take a look, because they're going to need to get 1, maybe even 2 wins to make sure that nobody jumps them from these other conferences, these quote unquote power conferences that are around them. That's going to be important to watch here throughout the coming days. Indiana State is the first team in the last 4 in, right ahead of New Mexico. Then Northwestern and Villanova is your last team in the field as we stand today. They are the cutoff line. Indiana State, do want to touch on them. We talked about Drake sealing their spot in the NCAA tournament. They have locked things in with that automatic bid. However, Indiana State also listed as an 11 seed here. Indiana State, I had right on the cusp of that 10-11 seed line. I thought that they had kind of built back up what they had lost there with a couple of losses in the middle of the season. But the loss to Drake in the conference tournament means that the selection committee is going to have to take a long look at them. And you don't want the selection committee taking a long look at you if you are a mid-major, non-conference winning team against power conferences. It's just not what you want. But Indiana State, I think, is a little bit different. They've got the country kind of around them. They have become a discussion point across college basketball, and that's key for them. They are not a brand as a program outside of Larry Bird, which was forever ago at this point. But this year, college basketball fans know who Josh Schertz is. They know who Robbie Avila is. They're aware of this team, what they have accomplished, what they did early in the season, what they continue to do through conference play. So this team has eyes on it, and I think that benefits them. They go from that 10 seed, they fall down, now they're in that last 4 in. They'll have to play for their spot in the NCAA tournament, I believe, at this point. I don't think that enough teams can pass them to knock them out of the field. I think right now they should feel pretty good about being in the field when we get to Sunday. Because the teams below them, we went over New Mexico. We talk about Northwestern. They've got to go through the Big Ten tournament. Now, they could make a run there. They very well could make a run there. But then you look at Villanova in the Big East. They've also got to make a run. And if they make a run, that could very well come at the detriment of teams like Seton Hall and Providence, who are just outside of the field right now. So the teams that are already in the field have potential to pass Indiana State. They could fall below those. But will all 3 of them be able to surpass them? Because if they do, then they're that last team, and what they will have to watch out for is the ACC tournament, because Virginia, Wake Forest, and Pitt all listed in the first 4 out right now. You've got Virginia, who really surged, made their resume look like it was NCAA tournament worthy, and then kind of fell back off. Wake Forest, who took some bad losses down the stretch here, they kind of looked like an NCAA tournament team, I thought, for most of the year, but they've taken some bad losses. They're going to have to figure that out, fix it in the conference tournament. And then Pitt, who has really just surged late, they weren't even in the conversation for quite a while, and then kind of worked their way back up the pecking order. They have the best net numbers of those ACC teams, but are coming kind of late to the party. I think really when you talk about the rest of the teams, we talked about Seton Hall, we talked about Providence. The other two teams that have any sort of ammunition to get up here at all, Texas A&M, who could make a run through the SEC tournament. Could you imagine if they made another deep run in the SEC tournament and Buzz Williams gets left out again? The frustration that he would express, not sure how that would go exactly, but they would have to make another deep run. It would have to be an incredible run led by Wade Taylor in order to get that Texas A&M team back into this picture because they struggled for so long. Would that come at the detriment of a team like Mississippi State, who's right there on the bubble? Yeah, who knows? We have to wait and see how all of this plays out and falls. So if you're Indiana State, I think that you feel good right now, but you don't want to see all these teams make a run. If they all start making a run, then you'll start sweating. The chances that they all make a run, though, when they're all on the bubble right now, I feel good about their chances as we stand today. Cincinnati, that last team that I mentioned, they would have to make a deep run. But they're in the Big 12, so if they make a deep run, they would pick up so many incredible resume-boosting wins that it would bring them back into the conversation. That's really where we stand with Cincinnati at this point. Utah, I mentioned that they're like, if you've got to do when you put out the little sheet on Twitter, you know, you've got your last four buys, your last four in, your first four out, and then your next four out. I don't think that there's four more teams that can make the field. So Utah's that last team on the docket, but they have to win the conference tournament to get in anyways. I put out a tweet kind of suggesting that when I had James Madison and Drake on there. Memphis at one point was on there as well. Kind of saying like, okay, I understand they're on my next four out, so you might get excited about it. But if they lose, even in the championship game, they're moving backwards, not forwards. So there's not enough teams that are going to drop below them to get them where they need to go. So I know it's hard to understand sometimes. It's part of just the business, to be completely honest. Like, you've got to have that list of teams that's next in line. So it is what it is. Right now, though, I think that there are 7 teams out of the field that can potentially make a run. Realistically, we're probably looking at, 4 to 5 who could make a run, given that maybe even 3 to 4, honestly, when you look at the fact that some of these teams would have to go through each other to make a run in their conference tournament. So that is your in-depth breakdown on the bubble. Hopefully all your questions are answered. If they are not answered, feel free. Reach out to me. Hit me up on Twitter. I'm happy. Send a tweet. Just tag me in it. Send me a DM. However you want to communicate, I'm happy to help talk about bracketology and the NCAA tournament over the next week. Please, the one thing I ask, we're going to talk about bracket picks in the next segment. Please don't just ask me to fill out your bracket. I can barely do my own bracket if we're being honest. So that's the one caveat there. We'll be back on the other side. We'll give you some inside look at who you should be keeping in mind when you fill out your bracket right here on 3 True Values. Welcome back in to 3 True Values as we keep things rolling. This is the final segment of the show today. Hope you've enjoyed the full breakdown of everything bracketology, the bubble watch, and now we're going to get you ready because you're going to be filling out a bracket here in just a few days. And I know if you're listening to this podcast, you're probably locked in on college basketball. You probably watch a lot of it. But maybe you don't watch all the mid-majors. You don't know which team on that 12 line is potentially going to upset a 5 seed because you know it's going to happen. Happens every year. You don't know which team that's kind of surging and then struggled and now they're back. Do I believe in it or not? That's what we're going to talk about here in this segment. And we will start off with a couple of 1 seeds. Purdue and Tennessee. Should you believe the hype? Purdue last year goes out to a 16 seed. Everybody has something to say. They want to talk about Matt Painter and his recent NCAA tournament struggles, his inability to reach a Final Four with good teams. They want to talk about Zach Edey and how he can't make a deep run. Talk about how they're returning basically the same team, and that team was disappointing and their regular season team only. They can't do it in the postseason. On and on and on and on. We have so many things that people have said, and I've been part of it. I said they've got to prove it. And only way to really prove it is postseason success. But here's what I'm going to tell you about Purdue. They have shown me something that has me at least confident that they're not going to lose to a 16 seed. All right? And that is it Zach Edey? No, he's still the best player in college basketball. Is it Matt Painter? No, he's still one of the best coaches in the Big Ten. He's kind of doing his thing. The biggest difference for this team, I think, in the postseason, last year to this year, is the play of Braden Smith. Last year, a freshman point guard who was really scrambling to get into actions. He was on a stage that he had never been on before, playing with Zach Edey, feeling like he had to get Zach Edey the ball. He had to do this. He had to do that. Well, then once a team comes up with a game plan to stop Zach Edey, what do? Do you just keep trying to force it in there and turnover? Or do you try to do it yourself? You're a freshman guard, not really known for your scoring. But do you try to do it yourself? Do you try to get other people involved who maybe aren't used to playing that way? How do you get them involved? Because you can't just swing it around the perimeter. You got to drive and kick if you're going to do it that way. A lot was put on his plate, and I don't think he was prepared for what was thrown at Zach Edey. And I know that sounds kind of weird. Like, why you weren't prepared for what they did to your teammate? Well, yeah, for most of the season, his only job was just to lob the ball down to Zach Edey, and then he could jog the other way if he wanted to. So for a freshman to go from that to now you are like running the show, okay? They're going to take away your best player. You're not passing to him. What do you do now? He did not look like himself in the NCAA tournament. Now as a sophomore, he's one of the best point guards in the country. He has really grown a lot. I like what I see from him. I think that he has got potential to have a breakout NCAA tournament, not just from a scoring perspective, but from that decision-making perspective. When teams throw different things at Edey, how is he going to handle it? Is he going to be able to step back, take a breath, survey the floor, and make the best decision? I think that's where we've seen the most growth from him, and I think that that benefits this Purdue team as we get into the postseason. Tennessee, the other one that we're going to talk about here, and this idea that Rick Barnes and his defensive system, his defensive players, they're not going to be able to get it done. And see, look, it happened against Kentucky. Okay, I hear you. The Kentucky loss, yeah, that happened. Kentucky also got a huge day from Reed Shepherd, a huge day from Antonio Reeves. All right, they played well. Dalton Connect changes the ceiling for this team. Yes, they can make a deep NCAA tournament run because they've got all of those defensive weapons. They've got all those guys who can lock you down. Zakai Ziegler, the SEC Defensive Player of the Year. Jonas Adu in the middle. Got Josiah Jordan-James. Santiago Vescovi has played good defense throughout his career. And now Dalton Connect is the last guy in that lineup. You've got Gainey also off the bench who provides them a little bit of a scoring punch when they need it. But yeah, Dalton Connect changes things for this team because in the past, you've got all those defensive stoppers out there, right? And what do you do? What do you do when you need a bucket, right? It's 51 to 52 when you've got the ball, you got to come down. You got to get a bucket on this possession. What's the call? Okay, like we can give it to Ziegler, we can let Santiago just kind of dribble with it. Josiah Jordan James can dribble with it, but what was the call? I don't know. It's because those guys aren't offensive playmakers. Now, you get the ball, you're down one, you need a bucket, you're passing it to Dalton Connect, and you're putting two guys in the corner, one guy on the opposite wing. You're running Jonas Adu up to screen. He is coming off of that, and he is either shooting a three at the top of the key or the wing, depending on which way they want to run the action. He's getting downhill, shooting a floater, maybe even dunking it. Or he can kick it out if he absolutely has to. I mean, Dalton Connect changes everything on offense for this team. He is a go-to bucket getter who they can rely on every time down the floor to be the offense. I mean, he was the offense, even in that loss against Kentucky. Look at it. I mean, put up 40-point game. Just be the offense. Like, okay, we're going to focus on defense. You go score the ball. And he does it. He does it over and over and over again. Okay, so he changes this Tennessee team. So yes, they can make a deep NCAA tournament run as long as he stays healthy and as long as those guys stay engaged and do their job on the defensive end, as well as making sure that they are helping him in the ways he needs help on offense. As we keep rolling through the bracket, we've got all these teams. I mentioned, I really like this Creighton team. Really like the way they play. The way that they get up threes, Baylor Shireman, even Mason Miller, who just kind of in the corner. He knows that this is Kalkbrenner's team. This is Shireman's team. Even Ashworth, like he's going to handle the ball. He's going to stand in the corner, and he's going to make about 50% of the threes that he gets. Can't ask for more from a starter. So I like that Creighton team. Love the way that they're constructed. Love the way that they play. I also really like this Kentucky team. Let me tell you, they're going to be the most polarizing team in college basketball. About half the country is going to pick them to lose in the first round to a 14 seed. Right now, I've got them playing Charleston. Charleston, a really good mid-major. Half the country is going to pick Charleston. The other half of the country is going to put them in the Final Four. I don't think there's any in between. There's no one who's looking at Kentucky and going, I might have them make a Sweet 16 run and then lose to, who knows? North Carolina, Texas, whatever. Like that's not happening. Nobody is picking Kentucky to make a run midway through the tournament and then fall out. No, they are picking them either this team is the best team in college basketball and they are going to make a run and this offense is just going to be clicking. Reed Shepherd and Rob Dillingham and Antonio Reeves. And Yinsu's giving you more under the rim from a protection standpoint on defense. This is just perfect storm. Justin Edwards, biggest key for Kentucky, by the way. I mean, it's all coming together. Or, but they don't play defense. They're going to get cooked by some mid-major who's got a high-octane offense. And I really can't tell you which one's going to happen because we have seen it go back and forth in recent games. I think they've got to get up for whatever game it is. We saw Kentucky, and I'm sorry, Kentucky fans, if you're listening, we saw what happened when Kentucky didn't get up for a game against St. Peter's a few years ago. All right, and that team, way more talented than St. Peter's, clearly. But they didn't get up for the game. They weren't there for it. They thought, okay, we'll focus on the next round. Think about who we're going to play in the second round, maybe even the third round. That's what they were thinking about. They weren't thinking about St. Peter's. So you've got to have them locked in and engaged. And I think if they're locked in and engaged, that offense is enough to get through those first two rounds. And really, at that point, then you're playing big enough games on a big enough stage that I think you get that locked in Kentucky that you got against Tennessee. So I think that's the key for this Kentucky team as we move forward. So we roll through the rest of the bracket. You look at which teams stand out as that team you want to have them make a run a little bit deeper than what maybe they're supposed to do. Gonzaga sticks out to me as a 7 seed right now. Maybe they land even lower than that. They land lower than that. They would have to face a 1 seed. It would depend on what bracket they get put in at that point, I think. if they end up in that 8-9 game, it's just going to be hard to beat Purdue, UConn, Houston. But if I'm one of those one seeds, I do not want Gonzaga to be that 8-9 that's in my bracket. That's the last thing I want, if that's the case. Florida is one that is interesting because I 100%, they were locked into this category of these teams that I was like, that team is underrated. Their seed line's not going to be that high. They are going to be dangerous. And then they lost to Vanderbilt last time out, and it was kind of like, what in the world just happened? You just beat Alabama. And Alabama, they've been ups and downs. They're not in this category for defensive reasons. But what happened? Hopefully it was a fluke. If Florida can make a deep run in the SEC tournament, they're definitely back on this list. So watch for them. They can make it to like Saturday, especially. Yeah, start looking at Florida as a team to make a run on your bracket potentially. Now, as we get lower down into these teams, it's time to look at that 11, 12, 13 seed line. Which of those mid-majors can really beat somebody and beat them bad? McNeese State, Will Wade coaching them, Shahada Wells, their star player. That is a dangerous team right there. I think that they are a major threat to do something in March. You look at a guy, Will Wade, looking to get back into high major coaching. Like he wants to work his way back. He wants a big job. Don't think it necessarily happens this year because of the show cause that he got at LSU. But next year, look for him to be one of the hot names out there in college basketball. I look at Grand Canyon, Bryce Drew, what he's been able to do. Now, they had a recent skid. They did. So we're going to have to watch things. It's going to depend on matchups. They're an interesting one to keep an eye on. Samford, we talked about Buckyball. Big fan of how they play. I think it's dangerous against some of these teams that struggle defensively, especially early in the tournament. Drake, really like what Drake has. They've got veteran players. They've got a coach who, I mean, he's just consistent over and over and over. Darian DeVries, what he's been able to do, very impressive over the course of time. And so those are the big ones. James Madison also should be included on this. 3 losses all season. That's ridiculous. I mean, just ridiculous that they're able to do that. And I'll throw Princeton in at the end of the list. The Ivy League, I've really liked what I've seen from them. They've got good computer numbers. I just worry a little bit about them drawing somebody that's got some real athletes like out there, just that can just dominate them from a physicality perspective. That's what I worry about with Princeton if they are to draw certain teams that are in that 4 or 5 seed conversation right now. Now, there are a couple of them that they could match up with, and it could be a really good game. So that's why I mentioned them right there at the end of this. So this has been 3 True Values. Like I said in the last segment, got any more questions about bracketology, about your team, where do they stand? Hit me up at JDFletch3 on Twitter. You can tweet at me. That's probably the best way to get me to see it, to be completely honest with you. My DMs are open, though. We'll be back next week with a very special edition. We're going to go through the full bracket. We're going to break down the matchups. We're going to break down the seeding, where I was right, where I was wrong. We're going to talk about the most fun games to watch, upset watch, all of it. We're going to go through everything on the bracket. So hopefully by then you'll have your bracket filled out. Maybe you save one. I know some people like to fill out a lot of brackets. Maybe you save one, put it off to the side. You wait to hear that episode and then kind of make your decisions as you go. Anyone who's in my bracket pool, though, if you're listening to this, do not do that because that is unfair to me. We'll be back next week right here on 3 True Values with your host, James Fletcher.